This week I've been digging channels, climbing scaffolding and working underneath here in between, which has all been preparation for big phases of work that will be happening soon, including changes to this shed and my beloved walkway on top. So I've started the process of emptying its contents, which will give you a first look at a space that has remained unseen for pretty good reasons. On the first day of the week, I arrived a bit later than usual and started with my now daily check of the experiment upstairs. Before getting more light into the open plan area that I was going to be working in that day. First, I had to move these bricks a few meters in case I needed a bit more space where they had been. Then I was putting in some brighter marks on two sections of the wall that would be easier to see and refer to. This work all relates to the drain on this second wall and the fact that it will run under the floor between the two walls that I was marking, along the line that I was then marking out with these posts and then some string. I had scheduled my work for the week around the weather forecast, but this day was turning out to be a bit brighter than I had expected. And after my morning drink, I was checking this area outside for some work later in the week. Back inside, I now needed to make some checks along the drain line. First, removing the rocks and gravel on the surface. And then rechecking the exact position and depth of the bedrock below, which was going to determine the amount of digging work I would need to do the next day. I then needed to leave earlier than usual to finish various tasks off-site that I had started in the morning. The next day started with the cloud, rain and mist that I had been expecting the day before, which was the reason that I had started the week with the indoor work. So it was pretty dark inside when I opened up, although it was starting to clear outside. Upstairs at my work desk, I wasn't looking at my experiment. Rather, I was marking a stick with the target depths for each floor layer at either end of the drain channel. which on this end of the wall will mean a bottom layer that is 22 centimeters lower than the other end, so as to enable a 2-degree gradient across the 11 meters between the two endpoints. And to help me measure the depths along the channel a bit quicker, I set up a couple of laser holders on the wall. I was able to remove material from a couple of sections with a hoe. Especially at the exit end, where the bedrock is a bit deeper and there is more earth and stones on top. And I was able to reach the target depth relatively easily. But I then got the jackhammer in action to break up sections with harder bedrock. And then I worked my way along the channel, hammering, scraping, and measuring with my now longer measuring bar. The reason for all this work and the digging now is that I want the drain to be fully contained within the bottom gravel layer of the floor. And I will need the drains to go in before I can add any of the layers above. So this is all preparation for the future work of putting in the final floor solution. By lunchtime, it was unexpectedly brighter, and I was happy to be able to head outside and use the jackhammer for another task that I needed it for, which was to break the concrete elements around the old well structure so that I could strip the structure right back to the last stone wall elements that I will remove by hand in the near future. Having finished the work on the structure, I then did some tidying up around the area, including the breaking up of bigger bits of rubble from earlier work that were difficult to move and more difficult to walk around. The next day was as warm and sunny as the forecast, and I had planned to spend it working outside. Clearing in front of and then inside the shed. First up, I had to remove some of the bigger things that I've dumped in this area previously. Then I could cut back the grass to make the area accessible and more usable in places. I'm not certain where these cornerstones came from, but I think they were from the garden walls that had been buried underground. I had used the tyres at one stage to avoid soil erosion when I had done some bigger earth shifting. While all these pieces of wood had been dumped here from out of the house during a phase of work with the builders. When I was moving these scraps to my main wood dumping spot, I heard some voices in the vineyard below. And I subsequently found out it was a team from the Catalan Agriculture Department monitoring vine health and biological risks. Then I was back tidying the area outside of the shed. Before some lunch, and then a visit from the vine checking team who confirmed my neighbour's vineyard didn't have any problems. And after a short house tour, there was time for a quick team photo before they headed off to help protect more vineyards from certain insects, bacteria, and other unwanted hazards. Before I start emptying out of the shed, I thought I'd give you a quick look inside and show you just how untidy it is. In this first space are a bunch of doors and some random bits of wood, all of which have come out of the house, and which I put in here to give myself the opportunity of reusing them in some way in the future. And then down the other end is a bunch of very random things, either that I've found in the house or that I've picked up over the last couple of years and thought I might be able to use at some stage during the work or in the future. And as you can see, this area is particularly untidy, and I probably need to do a good review of each of the things in there to see if I really want to keep it here. And then in this middle section, there are some more random bits of wood which definitely need to come out. Some bigger items here which I've essentially put in here for storage, some of which came from the UK, and then the odd box in the corner over there of stuff that I use for work in the house and which I put in here, I think, when the builders came to do their first phase of work. So all of this needs tidying up as well. So it's all pretty random and very untidy, and probably gives you a good idea of why the contents of this shed haven't featured much in previous videos. After setting up a space as a temporary storage zone, I started with the wood end of the shed, roughly organising the contents by type and what I might do with them. I then started clearing the central space and removing the wooden pieces I definitely wouldn't be needing. And then I started work on organising and clearing up the end space and its random contents. The next day, I was going to continue the work that I had started last week on cleaning and checking the cornice. So after my initial opening up routine, I got the scaffolding out and up as quickly as possible. This time I was working on the back wall, where there was a gutter still in place. So besides removing the old render and checking the conditions of the bricks and tiles beneath, I also had to check how much work was going to be needed to remove the gutter. And now for a bit of a closer look at the gutter and its connection with the cornice. The gutter is pretty well integrated into the top of the cornice here, between a brick layer about here and a tile level here. And it's certainly in there tight enough that I really don't want to be doing anything on my own to try and take it out. So for now, I'll just focus on cleaning all of the cornice beneath the gutter, similar to what I did last week. That will mean that I'll have to come back at some stage to clean the top layer of the cornice beneath the gutter here, but I'll be able to clear the majority of it today in this section and then work my way along the wall to see how far I get. And then here's a bit of a closer look at the roof, which, as you can see, is not particularly level and has plenty of undulations in it, and quite a lot of variation in the quality of the tiles, all of which I'll be needing to review and work out whether we try and keep, recycle or replace. On the last day, after my start of the day routine, I was back for a couple of hours of tidying up. Starting with the contents of the shed. After the shed work, I headed to the back wall to tidy the render rubble from the floor. And that is the end of my work for the week, with most of the cornice on this section of the wall looking in okay condition, although I will need to remove the gutter to be sure, and I'll need to do this section next week. While on the other side of this wall indoors, I'll need to do some tidying and smoothing of the drain channel, but I shouldn't have to do any more digging to get it to the right depth, apart from a section across this space, which I'll need to dig a bit later on. While in this corner, I may be getting some help next week to start the brickwork on the edge of this wall. And I might also do some work removing the last of the plaster along the vault edges. And with the work that I've done around the old well this week, it's almost ready for some final removals and then putting a more secure top in place. And with the rubble smoothed and the grass cut, it's now a good deal easier to access the shed, which is now a bit tidier and which I will finish emptying when I've got a different storage solution organised, which I may put some of the old doors down there into if I haven't done something with them sooner. So it's been a pretty busy week, and next week it's going to be busy again, especially if I get some help, which I'm expecting. So I hope to see you then.